What's up, everybody? Episode 2, No Suits Allowed. I'm Martin Montana. He's Eric Grinberg. Thank you for joining us. We have a special guest today. We're very excited to introduce John Pierce, entrepreneur, consultant, recruiter, among other things. Ironman. Did I leave out? I left out Ironman. Is that right?
Yeah, 13 of them.
Wow, that's crazy.
You know, they're behind you, John. That's zero.
The collective power on this side is zero. So,
yeah, we have no experience. What was the last thing you did?
I did Indiana 2 years ago, and I'm training right now to do Maryland September 20th.
Amazing.
So Ironman, that's the classic triathlon turned up a notch. Tell us a little bit about what it all entails.
Yeah, you know, it's a lifestyle. So it's when I was working at Merrill, I was there 14 years. Cincinnati, Philly, New York, out of shape, raising kids, realized I needed to get healthy. So I did an Olympic, and then the following year I did a half. And then I was like, well, if I could do a half, I could do a full. Super naive thinking. It's not linear like that. But the race is actually a 2.4 mile swim. So I've been practicing in the Atlantic Ocean in Juno Beach. It's a 112-mile bike. So I'm here in Breckenridge at my place, doing a little altitude training, and then it's a marathon.
Wow.
So that's insane, John, because I generally celebrate when I go for a 4-mile run. And so that...
See, I celebrate not running.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you having you on, John. It's good. It's good to see you. There's so much we wanted to get into. I'll start with this one. So we know you ran, amongst other things, you ran recruiting at 3 different firms or broker dealers. So we were super curious, living that experience, what was the same, if anything, in that role and in that experience and doing all that work, and what was completely different from firm to firm? And just as you can name names if you want, you don't have to, it doesn't matter, but just what was similar in the role? Like, hey, this never changed. And then what was absolutely firm specific?
Yeah. So great, really good question. And thanks for that. So I briefly mentioned Merrill, 14 years. I didn't lead recruiting there. Did some recruiting in downtown Philly before I went to New York and worked on Malua and PIA and financial planning. After Merrill, I joined Ameriprise. A dear friend of mine, Manish Dave, who recently retired from Ameriprise and is running a practice there, hired me to come in and help the P1 managers. So Ameriprise is a firm that has two options: P1 W2 environment, and then they also have a quasi-independent called P2, which is technically it's a franchise model, and so more of a branded independent model. And so my role at Ameriprise was to help the 110 branch managers who had never recruited experienced advisors get up to speed. And so that was a really good learning experience. We put together literally a recruiting book that I think has been beneficial at all of my stops. And Ameriprise gave me my first sense of what is independence. They really gave me a really good sense of a growth mantra and investment in the tech stack. There's not a firm that invests more in their tech stack than Ameriprise on an annual basis. It was very, very impressive. And so that was and then also the financial planning focus. Everyone talks about financial planning. Financial planning at Ameriprise is in their DNA. And so running recruiting there was different in the sense that I was on the ground floor of helping to reestablish a culture that was not about hiring kids out of college, working 6 days a week and cold calling, because by then, you're not allowed to cold call. And so it was
started? I think that's
exactly. Yeah. Going in on Saturday mornings and banging out 1,000 cold calls. That's how we all started, right? From there, I went to Stiefel, and that was a really good experience in the sense that I got to work with probably the smartest CEO in the business, Ron Kraszewski. I really like working with Kamansky at Merrill. Kamansky was a legend, but a different type of firm. Stiefel is a national firm, big footprint geographically, really good institutional middle markets group, and probably the closest W-2 environment that is independent. Now, Stiefel does have a nascent um, independent offering, but they're primarily a W-2 shop. But they're also a W-2 shop that provides the most flexibility that I'm sure we'll talk about later on. And then finally, Cetera. Cetera was my first foray into private equity. I had spent a lot of time talking to mentors and soundboards to, do I really want to go the independent route? Because it was the only thing that was lacking in my resume. And I learned a lot, on the independent side. I got used to the Sunday night calls when they're like, hey, what's your pipeline for this X company? Because Cetera, like Osaic and other firms, relied heavily on M&A, which is clearly slowed down. And so experienced advisor recruiting is even more important. That said, recruiting at Cetera, we had to make a lot of changes, and the competition in the indie space is really incredibly difficult. So when I think about Ameriprise, Stiefel, and Cetera, different business models, good people at all those firms, a commonality, and I'm sure you'll laugh at this, is that if you're really good at biz dev, you tend to have a little bit of friction with your CFOs, right? Because CFOs want to spend the least amount of money, and biz dev people want to get people in the door.
Right.
And so I would say a commonality of all three firms were that three incredibly really good CFOs at all three firms. But there's natural friction that occurs between biz dev and CFOs, and it's a healthy environment. It's a healthy relationship. But they're kind of competing goals, right? We want to achieve certain KPIs and recruiting metrics, but we also have to watch the bottom line. And so that was clearly a commonality. But each of the three firms had really different mindsets, and working in private equity was an eye opener, right? Because a lot of my mentors and friends and soundboards would really talk about how different PE is compared to being a public entity. And it was true. So those are kind of
That's
the
really good.
commonalities and differences.
Tell me more about that PE, that last comment. So it was different. I mean, we all know what it is, but like, how did it feel different in the day to day?
And so there's I talked about Ironman going from an ollie to a half to an Olympic not being linear in terms of your preparation and training mentally and physically and emotionally. Same thing with private equity. We would have a good year, and the board of private equity would think linearly. Okay, let's just double your budget and double your goal, not understanding that's not how recruiting works. The other thing that is different in private equity is the patience level. There is no patience. They are looking for an exit 3 to 5 years. Osaic's an anomaly given how long their private equity investors been there. But, Cetera got recapped by Genstar, a great private equity firm, December 22nd of 23 into 2 new funds. And so the patience level at private equity is not there. And, one of my learnings is if you have a bad year, you should expect to get shot. Unlike other firms, unlike other firms that actually have a little bit of empathy and grace and patience.
Yeah.
The other difference about private equity, and multiple people have told me, and I think it's fairly true, you can equate, private equity to a table full of scorpions, right? And the question really is your scorpion nicer than the other scorpion?
Right.
And I felt that Genstar was a really good firm that really understood the vision and had very high level objectives. That said, they have the same kind of characteristics of other private equity firms. And private equity is clearly driving up the multiples. KKR, Bain, other firms that are coming in are really changing the landscape on the fourth wheel that we haven't talked about yet, which I'm sure we will, and that's the RIA space. So
Right.
that's a little difference about the private. My learnings about private equity, and I'm not telling tales out of school. I've said the same thing to multiple people. So
Let me ask you this: as you've oriented into the RIA space or mentioned it, if you're an advisor, you've kind of explained it from a home office perspective. If you're an advisor, what are you taking into account when you're making the decision whether to join into a firm that's either private equity or an RIA that's private equity?
That's a really good question. So let's take a step back. The first thing that the financial professional needs to do, she needs to really cut through the noise of what's real, what's not, what's promised, what's not. There are key drivers why financial professionals move. When I've got a small consulting practice and I have a very limited number of clients. But I'm always helping them to focus on what do you really want and what's really right for your clients. And so I don't think that private equity versus public is that big a differentiator in making a decision to change firms. What I would say is the financial professional, she needs to cut through the noise of what other people are telling her. Having good mentors and good soundboards that are in her corner and not focused on their own self-interest, because a bad mentor can do more damage than a good mentor, but by a while. And so when you think about changing firms, I think the first thing has to be and we alluded to a little bit earlier with Ameriprise is, but what are the firm's capabilities to help your clients, right? So that's number one. And are they investing in the tech stack? Are they committed to really delivering on the promise of financial planning, which is 15, 20 different things, share a wallet, but that's number one. Are they investing in the tech stack, which includes marketing, which includes implementation of AI? I'm not going to be naive. Transcomp is important. So
Right.
the transcomp situation
Wait,
is
transcomp.
Wait, yeah.
Hold on.
Wait, I didn't get.
What is that?
yeah. So, when you think about the W-2 environment, transcomp deals today are 325, plus ACATs, right? And so a lot of the W-2 to W-2 moves are recaps based on divorce or estate planning strategies, or laziness in terms of not wanting to really go independent. Then you've got the independent space where, you're seeing deals for indies in the 1099 space of, 100 to 150. And look, there's headlines out there about 150. Firms are smart. They don't offer 150 just to one firm. They offer it to multiple firms. No one's targeting anyone. I loved competing. Steinmeier's amazing in LPL. And we competed hard. I didn't like competing against him because he's got lower GAFs, which is global admin fees. He's got better transcomp, and it was tough to compete. So I think when you think about making a move, whether it's private equity or wherever, publicly owned, it's really, are the capabilities going to help your clients? Because if it's not going to help your clients, you shouldn't do it. Second, I'd say is transcomp. Really, money's important. And depending on how you structure it, it can have generational, kind of impact. And I think freedom, right? Are you free to grow your practice the way you want to grow your practice? And are you free to have OBAs, outside business activities that help your clients within the regulatory framework? Because you see a lot of complaints and constraints from the wires about cross-selling, banking, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are some of the reasons that people move. And I don't really think that, the issue with private equity for a financial professional, she's probably not getting, she's not getting equity, right? When a firm is privately owned, by a PE firm, there's a very limited pool of people that get private equity, and the private equity firm probably keeps 85 to 90% of it for themselves, and they dish out what's remaining to some of the key executives. But it doesn't have any impact on the financial professional other than, are you going to be a roll-up? Are you going to have to repaper and move? So that's something to consider. But most of the big firms that are in the space, they're consolidating. Osaic's done a wonderful job of reducing their number of legal entities, potentially getting a new private equity owner or going public. Who knows what they're going to do? But they've done the best job of moving to a more streamlined approach. That when you limit the legal structures, you also reduce your compliance and supervision costs, and a lot of other costs, because you're not doing it for 6 or 7 entities, right? You're doing it for 1 or 2 entities.
I like that. So I want to play a scenario with you, John. So imagine, with all that experience, you're taking over recruiting for, XYZ broker dealer. We'll leave it in the BD space for now. What's job one? Like, what's the first mission, right? Like, because you've seen it in different slices and versions, as we all have. So if you've got this new partner and you got to go out in the marketplace and compete, what's priority one?
I remember I literally had Ameriprise branch managers walk out on me when I told them what it takes to recruit. Like, literally walked out of me. It was hilarious. So the first thing that I did at every stop was, what is the internal landscape? And I'll use Cetera as a good example. I mentioned Ameriprise because that was a training mode. Cetera was different, and when I was hired, I was told that you can make you need to evaluate. Are you going to make incremental progress, or are you going to burn the place down, right? And I think intuitively, as human beings, we would all prefer incremental progress, but incremental progress takes time, and private equity has no patience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we basically burned it down and built it back up into, pound for pound, one of the best recruiting teams, on the planet. So you have to make a decision: incremental, burn it down. And then the second thing you do is, do I have the right people in the roles? Whether it's senior recruiters, whether it's internal recruiters, cold callers, whatever. And are they in the right seats? Because a lot of times when you have consolidation, like a lot of these firms are built, Osaic's built on roll-ups and consolidations, you've got so many different people here and there in different roles, and we smash them all together. Too often what people don't do is they don't evaluate, are you in the right seat? So the first thing that I always do is look at the internal landscape. The second thing I look at is the external landscape. And I mentioned Rich at LPL. Thrilled, he's the CEO there, good friend, hated competing against him. I actually thought that he was trying to get me fired, because he wouldn't let me win. The guy would not let me win, right? And when you think about transition compensation, LPL is uber competitive, as is Osaic. When you think about the global admin fee, which eats into a ton of the EBOC and EBITDA of financial professionals, LPL, Wells Fargo, Finet, and Osaic are hyper competitive.
Yeah.
Ameriprise is well known in the industry. They have the highest GAF. And they also justify it by many things they actually deliver. So I'm not criticizing them. The fact is, they have the highest GAF. Cetera is very close to them. LPL, Osaic, and Wells have solved that issue. And so when you look at the external landscape, the first question you have to ask yourself is, are they willing to compete? Right? So you look at the internal landscape, you look at the external landscape, and then the final thing is, are they willing to invest? And so we alluded to it. Investment in the tech stack is not a nice to have, it's mandatory. We are going to have fewer and fewer firms in our industry The consolidation trend will continue. There's not a lot of M&A going on because there's not a lot left to buy. And so it's going to really focus on the RIA space. And then, are you truly competitive in recruiting? And to be truly competitive in recruiting, you need to continually invest in the tech stack. You need to continually invest in marketing. You need to start being creative where you can from a legal and regulatory perspective with AI. What can you do to accelerate prospecting? What can you do to accelerate the reduction in friction, between entities to solve things? What can you do to accelerate thought leadership pieces? And then, I think finally, and we kind of alluded to it, how stable is the firm? Okay. How stable is the firm? And all the firms that I've worked for are incredibly stable. I throw LPL and Osaic in there. The Commonwealth trade shocked a lot of people. But when you think about what's left out there, I do think you're going to see a lot of these rinky-dink broker-dealers with 100 reps continue to be swallowed up because there's just no economics in it. They can't keep up with the legal issues. They can't keep up with compliance issues, regulatory issues. And the reality is, I think we're all seeing that a lot of these smaller firms have made their living on high net worth products, hedge fund type things, and you can't live on that long term. So those are the kind of three things I looked at when evaluating, especially going into Stifel, working with Ron and Jim, who are probably the best tandem CEO president on the planet, and as well as Cetera, that's gone through obviously a lot of change with their mergers and acquisitions and leadership.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah, Eric and I were just talking about this last night. Actually, to go back to your idea on people, talent, right, and relationship, especially in recruiting. I mean, we've all seen, call it a really talented person have a slower year on the recruiting side, and that firm pushes them out. Him or her, they're gone. Yeah. And we were saying last night, I mean, that's a 3 to 4 year recovery in that market. I really believe.
Yeah, you're spot on. Look, recruiting is really simple. It's math and it's art. That's it. It's math and it's art. And firms that have a historically good recruiter and he or she hits a bad spot, I think a lot of times the CFOs and the data people and the metric people and the KPI people, they should buy themselves a mirror. I almost cussed. They need to buy a mirror.
You can do it. You can do it. It's encouraged.
No, I mean, they really do. They need to buy a mirror because I look at how many deals I've lost because of a gaffe fee or because, the finance had to be cutesy. And so, we're paying 100 basis points on advisory, but we're paying 50 on brokers. But if the brokerage is not the quality brokerage we want, we're going to pay 25 and we're not going to pay anything on workplace. We don't believe in workplace, even though it's very clear 12 to 14% of all workplace assets roll over to IRAs in fee-based business that you don't have to pay for, right? Yep. And so I was really pleased to see Durbin come in as CEO of Cetera because he lived 30 years at Fidelity, which is workplace, and they needed to fix that, and they'll get it fixed. So it is. It's also a cultural hit. You get rid of a historically good recruiter because he or she has got a bad 18 months without looking in the mirror. And a lot of time, look, you can. I divvy people up into like 3 categories, right? You got your high activity, high performers. Yep. Those are your studs, your horses. You feed them, you give them all the resources they need to win. And then at the bottom, you got the low activity, low performance. Those are the people you need to get rid of constantly. And every organization has low activity, low performance recruiters, and low activity, low performance finance people and metrics people and data people and onboarding people. The broad brush that everyone that's not a recruiter paints on recruiters is completely wrong because they think recruiters are overpaid and they don't work that hard. Total nonsense, right? And then the middle bucket is these are people that are high activity. They're just not getting there, right? And they need the right coaching, the right mentoring, the right soundboarding. And if you can take high activity, low performance people and turn them in to your top 10%, you'll have the best recruiting organization on the planet. And so it sends a really bad message when you lose good people due to, number one, goals that are unattainable.
Yep.
And then again, I think, everyone's used to BHAGs, right? Big, hairy, audacious goals, right? But you don't.
Oh, I know you meant something else. Go ahead. Yeah.
But you don't fire people, for goals that are unrealistic. That's why you typically have a ridiculous goal, a stretch goal, and you have a budget goal. And they never tell you what the budget goal is. But again, getting rid of good people for a bad 12 months or 18 months is more a reflection on the organization not really understanding how difficult a recruiter's job is.
Let me ask you about this one. I think this is one that most entrepreneurs can understand. You have a high performer with low activity, right? You have the guy who hits 3 big deals a year and coasts in between, right? Like, how do you deal with that guy who is probably looked at by the rest of the firm as a successful human being and one of the leaders, but isn't necessarily performing on a daily basis?
Yeah, yeah. You're right. Those people that have that that you kind of profile, history eventually catches up with them.
Right.
Right. Reality eventually catches up with them. And that I'm not referencing those kind of people that close 2 or 3 big deals a year and get 3 big paychecks and then coast the rest of the year. I'm in terms of getting rid of, our prior conversations, it's more about good people who just hit a rough patch. Well, and again, good people hit rough patches for stuff that's going on in their personal lives. When they lose deals for reasons that the firm is unwilling to change.
Yep.
But for the person that only closes 2 or 3 deals a year and then coasts for 6 or 7 months, historically, life catches up to them, and they're the ones that tend to not be smart with their money. They live a pretty robust lifestyle, and then when they get shot in the head, they're shocked, and they're the ones that will then be forced to take the first job that they get offered. So, when I think about recruiting, I always wanted to have 2 or 3 big deals a year, like newsworthy in the Wall Street Journal type deals. Like, you want to have, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, 3 of those a year. And then your bread and butter, though, in recruiting is the mass affluent. It's the $400,000 to $600,000 financial professional. She's got 70 million in fee-based business, a great book, doing really well. And a lot of people poo-poo that segment, and they shouldn't, because when you get to $1 million plus, it gets so darn competitive, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter how hard you work. If you can't compete on the gaff, if you're not willing to, or if you're kind of nickeling and diming them with the optics of a big upfront check, but then you hide a bunch of expenses behind it, smart financial professionals are going to see through that. Sorry I meandered on the question. I don't know a lot of people that really have a long lifespan by coasting in recruiting.
Yeah.
Because it truly is a numbers game. It really is. And then, you need to, we talked about art, and you both nodded your head, which I was glad to see, because it's so nuanced. It's so relationship driven, and the finance wonks and the data wonks and the compliance people, they're so clueless about how we hurt when we lose deals.
Yeah.
Relationships that we've built 6 months to 3 years on, and we lose a deal because of the wonks, right? That's emotionally painful.
Yeah.
And that's why when we land a big deal, we deserve to get paid.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. And I like what you said too, John, about maybe the outside perception of, that maybe you folks are overpaid or something like that. I mean, Eric's a great example, right? Closed ton of business last year. The largest team was
24 million.
24 million. So on the outside, people can go, oh yeah, like, you got lucky or you something. But if you watch how he operates and the amount of outreach and the amount of work and of COIs and it doesn't end. So it's no accident, right? Like the layman might go, oh yeah, whatever. Like just you fell into it. I would that's not even close because you wouldn't get access to that kind of team by accident, right? Like it
is 24/7. You are talking to recruits when you're on vacation with your family. You are picking up a phone call, when you're finishing up that run. You are working late at night with your internal to deliver the 40 things that this pain in the rear end rep wants because you really want them. And it's important to deliver that. But there's no accidents in recruiting. There's no rock stars in recruiting that occur by accident. It's because you are always working and you're always communicating. So you're doing the math, and the top 10%, they get the art.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that you spend more and more time on and the people on the outside don't realize is you just spend time I've spent 2 years with teams not even talking business, right? For 2 years, you spend just listening to where they're playing golf, where they go on vacation with their family, how's the wife doing? And 2 years later, they're finally ready to go, right? So it's the 2 years of work that, you can call it recruiting, call it building relationships. That's the art. It's, that $24 million team was 2 years in the works for me, right?
Exactly right. Spot on.
Yeah.
And you're right. The groups that poo-poo the recruiters' results are the ones that they came to hold a conversation. I remember having a conversation with a CFO at a firm, and he was all excited about talking to a big recruit who actually had an LPL, and he's like, "What do I talk to him about?" And I'm like, "What? What?" And so I gave him Ford. So I have a very simple construct. It actually, I picked it up at Ameriprise from Jeremy Straub, actually. Jeremy Straub's dad. Ford's really simple. I'm like, hey, CFO, Ford, F. Talk about their family.
Yeah.
O, organization. Give me your work history.
Yeah.
R, recreation. What do you do for fun?
Yeah.
D, dreams. What do you really want to do when you grow up? Right? Stick with Ford, you're done. And we don't even talk business. So to your point, you're spending 2 years focused on relationship development because what the CFOs also don't realize, it doesn't matter what your metrics are, what your goals are. Financial professionals move on their time frame, no one else's.
Yeah.
And it's you can't scare them. All the deal's going to expire. They don't care.
Yeah.
They got, they've
It's
got
another
10
deal
other
next
deals.
week.
Yeah.
Right. It's just doesn't matter.
Or you don't want me in day 91. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's the disconnect between salespeople and other people.
Yeah. This team was, I actually did a meeting with a president of a BD, and it was me and the external recruiter at this company, and it was me and the president of the BD wanted in. And so he came in, and me and this external recruiter were texting each other back and forth probably 40 times of, man, this guy is horrendous.
Oh my God. Well,
this guy says, he's like, the transitioning is really hard, especially here. I'm like, the direct quote. And I think John knows this external recruiter, and we were just like, who says things like that?
Yeah, well,
and that's the guy who is also axing people for not performing, right?
Exactly. 100%, 100%. Well, and it's also like the recruiter that has a good year or two and gets put up on a pedestal, but he doesn't evolve his pitch. He has the same tired story. And I have a good friend of mine who's a single external recruiter, and he refuses to work with this recruiter because he's like, you can't use the same story with everybody. It just doesn't resonate. So you need to grow and evolve and change and not be. And and you can't force people to recruit the way you recruit. We're all individuals, right? We all have our strengths, our weaknesses. We have our capabilities and our gaps. But when you try to force someone to recruit a certain way, your results are going to be horrendous. And yeah, it is amazing how people say just like, do you realize we're trying to sell something here? Onboarding sucks. You don't say that,
Yeah.
It's
I
like,
just had
you can say it's difficult. You can say it's hard.
It's
You
hard.
can say there's going to be we got a 90-day plan for prep work to make this go as smooth as possible. But
So I had one of those recently, John, where Eric knows this one, where it was an introductory call with the company recruiter, multi-million-dollar team. And the guy started off a little fumbling, unprepared, and literally said, "I'm sorry, I've been so busy with all these Commonwealth advisors." Meanwhile, this was a Commonwealth team. And then it was just, and then of course, after disconnect, and I called the team and, "What'd you guys think?" And not interested at all. Don't want a second call. They shut it down right there. And I mean, to your point, like you get one shot, and it can't just be you reading a thing or whatever. You got to listen, all that. So, all right, John, before we wrap, we really wanted to ask you, tell us about your consulting business, because you started this a while back. So can you tell me, why'd you start it? How has that grown? What are you doing with it today? Fill us in on everything about that.
Well, thanks for asking. So I actually started the consulting firm after I left Merrill, not really understanding what I really wanted to do. And then I found that I could do some decent work after I left Ameriprise, helping Ameriprise on some things that were pretty important to them. And so I kept it active. And then Genstar, bought us out December 22nd of 23. I understand why they did it, but it would have been nice if they just would have waited an extra week so I had to pay taxes immediately. But Genstar, the Cetera, that went into 2 new funds. And that's when I'm like, I'm done. I'm done with corporate. And I had to sit, obviously, I took a year, and actually I haven't told anybody this yet, but you'll be the first. So I wrote a book, and it's called Unshakeable Confidence, and it is being published by Pegasus Worldwide, LA, New York, Paris. Pre-orders will start probably the end of August. And this book is how to survive in corporate, how to thrive in corporate, how to deal with all of the ups and downs, and really understanding the importance of coaches and mentors and soundboards. And so this is going to go wide. I think we're going to do pre-orders end of August, but it's basically 30 years of my life, the good and the bad, and trying to accelerate and help people who are early career, mid-career, and then finally kind of at my stage, right? I'm done working for the man. I've got 2 or 3 corporate consulting clients, and that's I only want a handful because I really want to make an impact and help people.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wrote the book, and I think anybody that's been in our business for 30 years, we have an obligation to give back, right? We really do. And if by giving back I can make some money, terrific. But I've been so blessed and helped throughout my career. Every stop I've learned something. Every stop I picked up new capabilities and new insights. And I see this with a lot of my friends who've been in the business. We have an obligation to help others. And I got my after Stiefel or during Stiefel, I got my doctorate at Penn in education. I've always been really a continuous learner, and my dissertation really informed me some of the inequity and inequalities in our business for people that don't look like me. A bald white guy, and so this book is an attempt to help everyone. But it's also a recognition that, as a leader in our industry, it's not okay just to hang out in Juno Beach or Breck and count your money, right? We need to help other people. And I appreciate Eric because Eric, Eric knows people that I know who had a bad patch and they got rift or really good dialers or really good internal people. And, when M&A slows down, it's very clear that the reduction of force starts occurring. And you're starting to see that across the board. And so firms like yours are super helpful to help others. And again, so from a consulting perspective, I'm a big believer in thought leadership. And so I publish in Forbes once a month. I've got 30,000 LinkedIn followers that follow my content. And, after the book launches August, September, my race is September 20th. So I think in October, you should ask the question, what are you going to do when you grow up, John?
Take a nap. How about that?
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, we really appreciate you joining and spend some time with us, John. Great to talk with you. Love your insights. Love your thought leadership. Where can people go to see the book or the launch of the book?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. And I want to congratulate you and the team that's in the room on the growth of your business. It's been fun to watch. There's some really good firms out there. And then there's some really bad firms out there. And you guys are a first quintile firm. So congratulations on your success and your growth. JohnPierceConsulting.com, not very intuitive, is my website. And Pegasus will be doing a big launch, but I'll make sure that they'll be pre-orders will post on LinkedIn when they're ready. I just signed off on the first email that's going to go out yesterday, actually. And you can see I'm doing a lot of work in not just and thank you earlier. You talked about just financial services, but entrepreneurs. In this book, I've got some incredible emotional reflections from leaders across the industry, medical doctors, ad space, publishers, music industry people, CEOs that share their story. And every person you look at, that every time everything they touch turns to gold. Well, it took 20 years for them to get those skills for everything they touch turns to gold. Right. And so I think a lot of these personal reflections are going to be super helpful for your audience. You'll see it on it'll be announced on my website, but LinkedIn, Twitter. Pegasus has got a national worldwide footprint, so they're going to do whatever they're going to do. So.
Well, congratulations on the book, John. Great having you, man. You definitely have done things your way, which is why we thought of you and wanted you to come on here and share some of this. So kudos, man. Congrats on everything you've done. Looking forward to the next chapter. What are you going to be when you grow up? Maybe you can tell us next time.
I don't know. Ask me in October. We'll do it in October.
There you go.
Man. I appreciate you, John, and everything you've done for me in my career. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Take care, guys.